as we're trying to cover what we lost. Was it on? It was Monday. So we get to see that in our code we have the htaccess file that turns on the right engine and ensures that everything is directed to index.php. And in index.php, we tried to route, we created this sort of front end controller that routes every view or every front end file of this web application through the app/views directory. However, as we proceed further, we are going to be upgrading from level to level, and at the next level, we are going to be looking at routing. Hmm. There is a computer. The next level of routing. So, what's routing? Routing is trying to come up with routing is trying to come up with rules through which, just a minute. Okay, I'm sorry for that. I was still saying that we have we have been working with the index.php where we sort of illustrated some sort of routing. We were trying to customize URLs that are used to access some of our pages on our website. And by doing this, we defined this directory to be the one where each and every web front end file would be found. And after doing that, we try to sanitize the request set view. We tried to direct it to the file. Um, Let me show you. We tried to get the view from that directory, and then we tried to prevent traversal attacks to those views, and then we built the full path to that view by saying that if someone went to apps views, which is views path, and then they get a view file, say home, then the .php will show them their exact file. So if someone went to and said they wanted, or let's say about page, it would go to the views path, which is app views, and locate the file called about, then appends the .php on it. But this works for the website, for the web pages. But sometimes the website has more than just web pages. It has so many resources. For example, the controller files that have functions or classes that manage so many things in our system. Sometimes these are images, videos on, in our files that would like to have specific file paths. There are two ways of identifying a route in your system. Like I'm about to show you. Let me try to get the whiteboard here. Mm, you'll forgive me for that very slow start. All right. So assuming our website or our web application was running on a domain called sportscope.com. So our domain would be sportscope. Uh, that is sportscope.com. Now, the first thing is someone might want to access a login page. We can say that let the login page be /auth to the person trying to access. Let it be /auth slash the session ID here through which this person is trying to access so that we can log every login to securely manage it. So we can log the session ID here. And this session ID would be a very long string that you would find appended to a domain. Probably it's a very long string or even a short one. Or someone might want to access a certain club, and then their their path would be club slash the club's name. So the club's name gets to go here. So that for each and every team in our system, if people trying to access it, it would always be sportscup.com /club /Arsenal, sportscup.com /club /. Manchester Dash United. Nkwambie kusema kulima. Bansoliwe. Mm. Mm. Nede wa approving ebbanja litandika eri omu. Yes. So I'm teaching. Go to the phrase. And that's good. So there are two types of routes that we can create in software development, especially in web development. The first one is creating unique IDs, UID, within our permalinks. And the second one is defining predefined words that determine our predefined words that determine our links. Let me give you a very good example of a very good example is if I come to copilot.microsoft.com, it loads just like that. If I'm to type in something like, hi, how was your day? To Copilot. Co- Mm. So Copilot generates a sort of, if you look at this very top, it generates a path called charts where it keeps all the charts. Yes. AI tesabakubira. Anti cloud itegenerating ebifaananyi. You can maybe to ChatGPT. Then after that, it creates a unique ID of this particular chart other than giving it a name. Kikuba ekifaananyi mugambe nti naakuleetera table. Kino erimu column bweti ne bweti ne bweti. Ekyaddiko. So this means that the people that routed Copilot were ones that ended up creating a route whereby for each and every chart in the database they save it with that exact UID or unique ID of this chart. And then they created a directory called charts to organize charts within it. This is a route. This does not tell exactly where this particular file of this chart is saved on the Microsoft server. This illustrates the two things I told you. It illustrates the unique ID and the predefined word, which is charts. So when you're developing your own system, you want to make sure that every single thing is well organized with routes, whereby if someone wants to go to a login page, the code sort of directs them directly to the login page by saying that visit this domain forward slash this directory, and when they go to that directory, they find exactly what they need. It's more so mm-mm. So this is what we are going to do today. I'm sorry, people are confusing me here, but that's what I'm talking about. Routes ensure that they create a structured URL through which we can access resources on our web application. They are exact URL paths. Sometimes they're not URLs, they're URIs, as we shall see. And now, I started by saying that we started by doing something a little similar, but so much childish for starters, where we said that let each and everything start with the home page as the default view and the location or directory through which we can find our views to be app/views, which we defined as views path in our code. And then we said that the views path should be the views path, the view which is home, about, whatever, then we appended .php on it. So that if someone went to Sportscope slash about, it would load app views and then about.php, and that would be the file that loads. But this is so easy and it can be totally integrated. So we are going to create a few files that are going to help us to generate the routes of our application that would always be followed. so that every single time we are creating a particular file in the sports scope, that file follows that specific path, and these parts would define where we find our model files, where we find the different controllers or the functions, and well, etc., etc., so that we don't need to keep on writing these long paths of within our system, but we've created a sort of a framework through which we access these different resources. Routing is so good that you don't need to, it doesn't just route to the file, but it can also route to a specific function or method within a specific file. You see, you can route to a specific method. A method is more of to a specific function, and that function is already in another file. And you don't need to take the whole file, but you take that particular function and then you reuse it somewhere else. And that's what makes object-oriented programming absolutely very beautiful. So to do this, if you recall very well, under apps, I have to delete some few files here that we don't need. For example, that and this, we don't need those two anymore. Mm, so, and also this, we don't need that anymore. So this is clean code. So when you look at this precisely, you would realize that am I sharing my screen? Jeez, I'm sorry. I wasn't sharing my screen. I wasn't sharing my screen. Let me repeat some few things that I've said. That's so disappointing. That's so disappointing. I wasn't sharing my screen. Okay, let me repeat myself. My bad, my bad. So let me first wrap everything that I've been doing so far and then I repeat. I was wondering why my messages are displaying while I'm sharing my screen, but so um so what ideally happens is this way. I was mentioning that if you have a domain and let's say it's called sportscope.com. This is our domain, and this domain loads our website. Hey, 120 is 1 times 6 months. Add the VAT of that total figure. Check it out. Do the math. So if this is our domain and we would like these people to access, then plus, you know these things great. 0.18 times 720,000. So that means you make an invoice of 849,600. So if you have a domain of sportscope.com and you would like someone to access uh, their, their particular clubs, you would say, you know very well that our database has so many clubs. We have Arsenal, um, we have Manchester United, we have Manchester City, we have Chelsea, we have Sports Club Villa. We have mm, we have Kakeka, we have Kakeka FC, etc. etc. So, if we have all these clubs in our database, please, you can take it all. So if we have all these clubs in our system and someone wants to access their particular club, we would route our system to create a unique route. A route is like a route or maybe a road that they can take to access those clubs. So they will have to say that our domain slash club slash the team name here. Team name. With the team name, if it has more than one name separated by an underscore. But often these clubs have a longer name. For example, Arsenal is not just Arsenal, it's Football Club Arsenal. Manchester City could be Sports Club Manchester City, Manchester United. They have longer names, but we always take the shorter name, which is Manchester City, instead of saying Wolverhampton Wanderers. We can say slash Wolves etc. Another alternative is saying slash club and then forward slash. Each of these clubs, you get to give them a unique ID, also known as UID. So this would be a UID. A UID is a specific string. It could be a number, letters, or both combined that in our API represent a specific club. We shall create APIs in a bit. So in this way, when someone wants to visit Arsenal, they would have something like club slash maybe a very long string. Then when you're not there, I gave an example of Microsoft Copilot. If you visit Microsoft Copilot, their domain is copilot.microsoft.com. But if you try to add a new chat and you say, um, will Arsenal win the Premier League this season? Now, if you start a new chart, their system, their system would automatically, Arsenal are currently the favorites to win. This AI is stupid. So this chart will automatically create a folder called charts, and under the charts directory, it creates a unique ID of this chart. So it doesn't give, this chart has a name, and the name of this chart is, I don't know. Say I'm done. And the name of this chart is probably and the name of this chart is probably Arsenal's Premier League title. So instead of saying Arsenal's Premier League title hopes, it gave it a unique ID, and the unique ID is this long string GR, blah 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 blah. So this is called routing. It helps to arrange our URLs to access specific resources on our server without necessarily um, exposing without necessarily exposing the parts of our website. Then, as you came in, I said that we created the htaccess file where we routed every single traffic into index.php. And index.php sort of tried this routing to a beginner level by saying that it defined two constants, and the first constant was home, and the second constant was the directory through which we've put all our front end files. Now, by doing so, it ended up giving us a chance to create this line, whereby if someone wrote sportscop.com forward slash about, it would go to the views path, which is app views. It gets the name they've written, then it adds .php, and that's the file these people are trying to access. But again, this is also childish because someone would still understand that this file could either be in views and apps. So we want to create a framework in which we can only access things that are routed in the system. To do that, we are trying to achieve a few things, and some of those few things is to ensure that every single resource on our website is safe and is well organized to the person viewing it, and even to ask the developers, so that if I want probably to access a file called um, classes slash login controller.php, then I don't need to write all that word, but I can say login controller, and then it would know where to go. But to take it to a deeper level as a framework, I can also identify a specific class or function within that entire controller file that I can refer to, and then I extend it within my view file or model file without calling the entire file. So that's what we are going to do. Now, to do that, we are going to create under app, we are going to create a new folder, and that folder we are going to call it core. Oopsie, that's a file. It needs to be a folder. So under app, we are going to create a folder and we're going to call it core. And under core, we are going to create a file and we are going to call it router.php. I want you to take position that router.php starts with a capital letter, unlike all other files that we started with small letters. Then still under app, we need to create routes.php. So that means we are going to forego this folder called router.php. Let's delete this because most of these things are actually going to go under core. A minute. So most of these things are going to go under core, but we shall see those as we proceed further. So having created this, we are going to trim our index.php that we created the other time down to 4 lines of logic where they get to load the router, and then the router initiates and loads routes to dispatch. We are outweighing the index.php of its previous overload, and we are making it in the TTRBA. Which one is the one? Rich. TERBANCLE. That's the spelling of Fana. So let's start with our index.php because at least that's what we have. So the index.php remains the front end controller, and instead of being, of course, it's going to remain as the entry point of everything, but it will load the router class, which we've created in app/call/router.php, and it will instantiate the router pointing at app/views. Then after that, it will load the app/routes.php where all routes will be defined. Then it will later dispatch the current HTTP situation to those files. The purpose is to ensure that it knows the routes of everything, and then it needs to know the routes where everything is located, and then it takes someone's request to where they've been defined. Yes. No, Mugambi and Muchacha batajja. Akugambye nnyo batajja. Promise to join. So the row/view query string approach from the previous version that we have is going to be replaced entirely by the router, so that the router takes control of that. And then we shall have a URI matching the different parameters, and then we shall extract them and review the loading of all being handled with the file that is under core router.php. That sounds like Latin until we start coding. So without further ado, let us start. The first things first, it would be good if we first wiped these two off the face. So instead of wiping them, let us comment them out so that we can always recall back to them. So the first thing that we are going to do is when we're talking about theory, we talked about require, we talked about include, and then I talked about require once, and then uh, include once. Include means something is going to be used throughout. Require means that thing is needed before this file is loaded. Hmm? Require once means it's only required to be called once. We don't need it again. While include also means include once means it needs to be included once and not again. So we are going to use one that is called require once, and require once follows that syntax. It says require once, then you give a directory name, the file, and then the location in which it is. So um, we are saying require once. Let me use my own. So we are going to say require once the directory, and that directory is appended to. Let me first accept. It's appended to. I prefer using the single quotation marks. I prefer using this, where I'll say app core router .php that we've created. Jesus Christ, this is a very big mistake. App core router .php. What does this mean? It means that it needs to load the router class once. It's a class that we are adding in the core. That's why I said it should start with a capital letter. We shall understand more of classes when we start looking at functions in depth. So after requiring that once, the next thing that we are going to do is to instantiate this router so that we can pass the absolute path of the views directory. How do we do that? We shall say that we shall come up with a new variable we're going to call router, and this router is going to be equal to new this router class that we've instantiated, and then we give it a directory of where all our routes shall be. So all our routes, we are trying to route to everything located at slash app slash views. I don't know why I keep app slash views. Okay. So the first thing we did was to load the router class. So what we're doing here is we're trying to load a class for router, and what we are doing here is ideally to uh, instantiate this router by passing the absolute path to the views directory. So that's what we have been trying to do in the second place. I don't know if I can do this. Control X. And then I come here, right here. I think that's the director. Okay, so these comments are going to confuse us honestly. Let us first do with comments that are unrelated to the code. So we instantiated the router by passing the absolute path to the. So we are trying to tell the class that we shall create in router that you know what, this dot views is not correct. So we're trying to tell the router that the directory of our views path is that, and that's where you're going to find the rest of other kafunkunali. Is that my call? All right. Then after that, we are going to load the router definitions. Uh, we are going to load the files that we are going to add all the definitions that try to map our files to what we want them to be. So that's the next thing we're going to do. We are mm, we are going to load the route definitions. So we are going to do this by this thing has AI that's trying to guess what I'm trying to do. So all routers that we shall define in this particular file, this one, where is it? Aha. I think under app, core router.php. So under app there must be, let's create routes.php. Let's create it under app routes.php. Yeah. So ideally, this means that the class is the one that tries to instantiate everything so that we know where to go. But routes.php defines these paths, it maps them, is the best word to use. So we are going to say that mm, we're going to say that let us require once the directory, and this directory is slash app slash, we've called it routes.php. Okay, and then after loading it, we get to use it, and we say that so after loading this routes file, the next thing that we are going to do is to ensure that we dispatch all requests to it. So we shall say that router that we defined earlier, let it be dispatched to, let it be dispatched to dispatch. Perfect. So let all routes be dispatched. And then after, yes. No. Asa, you're spelling that table. You just say that because that's a report. That so and so is just on this charge. So and so is on so and so charge. So and so is on such and such charge. Then so and so is going to join us. Chituyamba okumanya baani abaafunidde. Then when I receive that report, I'll go into the system. Buli omu bw'ogamba nti yafuna charge tumuggye mu converts. So with these few lines of code, we shall not need any more all this. We shall not need this anymore up to here. Abatakute. Mm. Mm. Mm-mm. How baleke? So this would mean that our index.php has been trimmed to just these few lines of code. Let us go through it once again. We required once to have a class called router.php. Then in that class, we try to direct to it that every single view file is at app views. In case we start doing back-end code, we shall add the one for where our back-end is. Then we also included the routes.php where we are going to add every single definition or mapping of these files. And then we dispatch the router to them. And that makes our code cleaner. That is cleaner code. So the htaccess remains the way it is. Mm, then we go to the router class. Router. Open PHP and everything else is under PHP. So this is our custom router, and its key responsibilities is to register routes with HTTP methods, and we add to it its URI pattern so that we have a match of the current requests against the registered routes. And then we get to extract the parameters from any URI to a user, just like we showed this, so that we get to attach each route with specific UID. And then after that, we dispatch the v files for a callable handler that anyone would call, and then they get to access that, and we should be able to handle the 404 that we deleted from the index.php and 405 methods of not being allowed that are always not allowed in our routes. So to do that, we shall say class router. That's how we declare classes in PHP. And as soon as you declare a class, you must open it, and at some point you must close it. All right. So what's the first thing that we're going to do? We're going to start looking at the different methods that we have in PHP. We have public methods and private methods. Public can be accessed outside of a particular class, whereas private are within that particular class. In our own instance, if we wanted a class whereby registered routes are in it in a sort of array, then it would need to be a private one. So we can say private an array of routes. Let it be an empty array for now. After defining that, we need custom fallback handlers. Custom fallback handlers, just in case a page is not found in the routes, or maybe a route matched the wrong HTTP method. Probably someone is trying to access through a wrong HTTP method. Then we need to define those ones. So we shall define the first one by saying private. Um, we can call it not found handler. Not found handler is none. So this is for not found page would go R404 would now find a that, whereas private not found not allowed handler would also be now. This is wrong HTTP method but found for handler. and then this gets to change to private as well. Okay, then we need a path for the views directory. So we shall stick to private and say private, it's a string, and it is a string, and say mm, views views path. Let's first go back to home, to index, sorry. So views path is the default path for the views directory, and then we shall say we need a named route registry where we shall have the name. So we shall still stick to private array and say named routes. This will always carry the our named routes. Just a minute. So when we said those, so if we had to scroll all the way down to mobile devices, then we give H assignments, day 5, day 6, day 3, and always to home, Jerry Saka, then Athens, and so definitely for day 3, we need date 1. So H assignments, let's copy everything. Let's come all the way down. Skip. Arthur, your flash. Okay. Named routes. Okay. Then we start building a constructor inside of this class. So we shall a constructors are public. They're often public in nature. Constructors. Constructors are often public, and this is a function construct. Mhm. I would say string. Okay, let me first accept this. But inside of this, I want something simple all the way to here. So I'll say construct a string for views path. And then I open within this, I would say I would normalize to ensure that the trading slash on the views path is always there by saying that something like this. This the views path equals to views path, but let us ensure that the trading slash is there. So we shall say R trim this entire views path. And then this views path is together a trading slash, and we can concatenate this with a trading slash. Okay, that's our constructor. Added a constructor. Other things that we think of. I will find a better word. Ekyo kigamba AI nekikugattira mu output yakyo. Didn't pick. Abalekere. Omukama abalekere. Tobakola ki? Balekere. Gamba nti okomye ku bantu nkaaga mu in the message you append to that report. Nti okomye ku nkaaga mu out of 111. Anti awo bw'okozeeko like progress so far. Yeah, you progress so far. So, we want route registration paths where we register a get route and we get the URL pattern where we have a unique ID and handler to view a string that is can be callable. So this is also a public function. It's not private function. That does the get and string. Not really. So string name, yes. Evening. Now what? String, and that string is actually a URI. So the string is a URI, comma, handler to get what is called is a string that has a name that is null, and this is not route but rather self. It's on self, so that if we are to do this, then we would say return this add route post. This gives us add route. Get URI name. Yeah. function, we must ensure that we start with the constructor has got so the first one is to return argument when we are trying to get area and lab. So this is missing one thing. So URI and the name. So handler was meant to be. This was an error that so we've done that, then we register the postal code. So the URI and post. The first one was a get. Now we're just having a post and where we get a name, then self, which is ideally in principle return add router. That's and then also the name. Okay, when we are posting, so this is get post. The next thing will be put. Yeah, that enter where we say that name. All right. So get post put then patch. That is that. And then okay, this function it should give us this was put. This is patch. The name and that's it. Then after patching we have equals to delete. So we can write a public function that does the delete. We get that, and then in the same spirit, right? Where we can return this. This is a delete request. Where it gets there, and then the name. Get post put patch delete then after deleting register a route that responds to any HTTP command. This would be public public, and it's a function. Let's do that. This is any. So this we should be able to do any of the HTTP requests. The string that we have URI and string name is now self. And then then again here it should return this where the request does not get but any request. Okay. After doing this, we've been able to create routes, which is an empty array. We handled 404. Invalid HTTP requests, we defined the path. And then empty routes is also an empty array. Then we created a constructor, the get request, the post request, the put request, the patch request, the delete request, the any of the other requests. Then after that, we need to add a route, which is a internal method that stores a route definition. This is a dynamic segment you use in parameter syntax. For example, if you want to use something like post slash any slack, now something if you want that kind, we'll have to say private function. And this private function is route string method string URI string name self, that's fine. And then under this we shall create what is an self to normalize a URI to ensure that we want to normalize a URI to ensure the leading slash or strip of the trailing slash execute. Okay, let us try that. We shall say we shall say URI equals to that, but we shall say this, then a slash, and then we get to concatenate these together to achieve that. Then after that, we convert this so-called param. So the next thing is to convert the param, the parameter to named regex so as to capture groups and something like slash user slash um, the so-called ID would should such a thing should lead to slash user slash perfect.
It's okay.
It would be user question mark p the ID and then supporting things like slash that's what we want to achieve. So to achieve this, we shall say, so to achieve this, we shall start by saying that pattern should give us Frank, should give us Frank, replace all these things, the so-called slash this, and then what else fit in there? That this is way more than this, and then A to Z, A to Z, underscore, and then that, as well as A to Z, A to Z, 0 to 9, underscore, as well as a star, an asterisk, close the bracket, and this backslash and the quotation, the column bracket, and the slash. With what? Preferably one, two, we want to replace all that with okay. So we were able to replace all that regex that would be captured and make a payment to want it added to this P talked about this. Whatever this we said, it's where our ID goes. So inside here, we can say one, then that, slash, plus, close brackets, and all this is with the URI. All of those students that they don't get to respond from you. No, what is pattern formatting? Pattern. Try this. Okay. So having defined these patterns, we need to create an anchor for those patterns so that it matches the full URI. So we shall see create an anchor, and this anchor is to anchor the pattern so that it matches the URI. In this, we shall see pattern so pattern equals to pattern equals to hash on top concatenated to pattern itself, continued to right to the top so that I will cut. Then we come back to this and say that route equals to an array equals to an array where we have the method okay, but yes, we want it to be starting with an uppercase. So we shall say string, then we get this method, make it go right inside of the start with upper. Then use the URI. So we shall say that the URI is URI. operation. The next thing is we're going to handle the handler. So we shall say that the handler is the handler, and then another thing we're going to handle is the name. So we shall say the name is name. And those are different routes. After doing that, we shall say that this these routes, we're going to make a route so that we can index by name. If one is provided with one, is provided by saying that by saying something that you kept on saying that if name is none, then this named routes we can call this named routes. So these named routes which carries names is the URI network. So we can call this URI. We close this. One thing we'll do is to ensure that we return this to allow method chaining. So let us try to return this to allow method chaining. We do this return this. That is perfect. We continue with fallbacks. So here we're going to look at fallbacks. Just in case of anything, we need to know how we handle fallbacks. So to handle fallbacks, we shall set custom for effort and so one we're going to set custom fallback for offer page. By saying that we shall do this okay. So to set custom for offer, we shall create a public function, and under this public function we shall say that set the set not found to be callable as a handler with strings here. Just as a handler to be callable as a handler, and then so perfect. So public function for set not found to be called. So we set that to self, so that under this function we shall do the following. We shall so we shall set this not called back called Not found. Handler. So let us try this. And then we say not found handler. So good evening to you. How are you? Welcome back. I think she's around. So we are setting session file. We call it handler. And then this not found handler. Yeah, that's okay. And then we return this. Then number two, we are going to not allowed handler. Number two, we are going to not allowed handler that we ever mentioned. Under not allowed handler, we shall say that should be not allowed. So shall say public. Okay, let me just use this and I just change this to not allowed handler. Set not allowed. There's a button 6, right? Yes, he is that side behind. Yeah, maybe in the garden. No, down there. Mm. So set not allowed to be callable as a handler, where under this function you can see that the syntax flows this way where we say this don't allow that handler, that is correct, and then we return this. Perfect. So the first handler ensures that we set message simuyida byusinya bino bya ttiimu odonga ntekamuyida byusi emigo gyagenda kukuba kale eddakika zomaze kupano okeza kukola eripooti reports so far. I don't trust me. It's going to just happen like this. Can't he count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15. You so far called 15 people.
No, I've called 61.
You've called 61 people?
Yes.
And only 15 picked.
15 picked abalala but the wrong numbers. They changed their minds.
About what?
I know if you can't remember. It was a vibe.
Bameka abataakudde.
So I have a singer.
Kindi kansomesa.
Yeah.
So that's 7. So, so another thing we need to do under this class. So you can see that classes have methods. Some methods are private within a class, whereas others are public. Some methods are called constructors, and these constructors ensure that we can construct a sort of anything within our PHP and get an output out of it. And then, so when we are declaring a constructor, we start with double underscore and then we say construct. Yes. Thank you. What about Arthur? What about Arthur? I'm going to give mine to Arthur. No, Gordon is saying Arthur is his son. For me, they've given me water. Water. But it's cold. Anyway, I was still talking about constructors. Start with the double underscore and so construct. And you've realized that every single time you're going to define any singular variable PHP, we need to define under which data type it falls under. For example, you're saying the URI is a string, the name is a string, the handler is a string. Most of the things that we are dealing with are strings. That will be very important when we move further and you need to identify another data type that this fall under. And some private functions are quite longer, like this one where we had to normalize the URI. And then we're trying to come up with the patterns and then fallback handlers. So moving forward, having defined what happens to non-form pages and not allowed handlers, we're going to look at here how we generate a URL. Mhm. Mm, So we're going to, the next thing we're going to look at is URL generation. Though I'm not so sure about my organization of code. This starts from here. This is a private function. I'm not so sure about, there must be an error somewhere. So to identify an error in PHP, you must know where each function starts and ends. It's hard to have a function within another function. So this was a private function. That means these two are not meant to be inside of it. So they are meant to be outside of that private function. Mm, what's the opposite of tab? It's a straight shift tab. Perfect. That is where aligned. Mm. So we've fixed the error that we had. For cleaner code, you must remove unnecessary spaces and ensure your code is well arranged. Not allowed. Okay, that's fine. Like this sounds to be wrong. This route. It's undefined. Undefined. Okay, I now understand. This routes. Route. Okay. We are now on the same page on that. Then here, this not allowed handler is wrong because this should start with a single n, not allowed handler. All right, we fixed some of the errors that were in our code. Mm, So we were able to work on fallback handlers. The next thing we're going to do is to work on construction of our URL. So it's now time to construct our URL. You can call it URL generation. So to be able to generate your whole URL, I think we still have a lot of things to do before we reach to dispatch. We are going to generate a URL for any named route that goes through this class by filling in the dynamic segments. For example, if the ID of a particular thing is, let's say, a player, we shall have something like player slash if their ID is, let's say, the player of that ID is that number, so it shall be player slash 24562. That's what we shall come up with. So to be able to achieve this, we need a public function for URL. To get this, we shall say public function for URL, where our parameters are name, which is a string, which is a string, and we have an array around the different parameters that we shall be using. That gives us an array, and basically that's it. We shall say this is a self-standing function. Is it a self? It's not. It's a string. It's a string, and it will give us. So under this, we shall say that if we're saying functions again, and we are going to use this not is set. If not is set, then these routes should be names. That's perfect. What do we do if it's not set? We throw a new, not a route exception, but rather I prefer, let me first do something like this. So we shall say this, but instead of throw a router exception, let us throw a runtime exception, and this exception will take on a word that can runtime. let's use double for best results because we have the router variable inside of it, which is not supported by what we had earlier. So we can say not uh, this name that is currently being registered is registered. So that's what it should throw. You know very well that every time we have an if, there is an else, but this is a self-standing if because we've done a not is set. So we don't really need an else. Great. I've closed. Close. Just as yep. So we shall say URI is this named routes and then name. That's very okay. And then we get to replace each param. So at this point we need to replace each we need to replace each param. At this point we need to replace each param with the supplied value. To do this, we say now we do a loop, and we talked about loops in theory. We had talked about loops in theory, and one of the loops we talked about was a for loop, a while loop, and then for each loop.
We're not telling me that churches.
Hmm?
We got that church. Mabuza which church is in
It's okay. See me, I'm back. It's okay. For each params, the key pair to value we should have. So we should have our URI. We get a string of a key and then a page. I love this AI. It auto completes everything. So it's wrong. Where is it wrong? I don't need this in double quotes since I'm going to manage that. So let's try this. Then I'll add that. I'll pair it with key. Then after this, I'll also use double there to close this. Comma, and then not value but rather yeah, value, but we want this value to be URL encoded, so we shall use URL this value. This is what we do. So URL encode our URI, and then this value also needs to be a string. You need to define it as a string. So you can say string, and then we place this value inside of it. So URL encode your value and then you close. Okay. And then after this, after closing, we need to return this URL before closing this function. So we shall say return URI. That was the very last hardest part of everything. So After this, the last thing to do, since in index.php we called the dispatch, we need now to handle the dispatch, which is just a match and run. Bino what gakyaliwo. Hmm? Amanyi ennaku ye takyanywa konko. Miguel agenda tukubiramu kadrill omwo. Omwana agikuta nakola bwati. Asa. So we are going to do um, some dispatch, which is the very last thing that is needed in our class. So to be able to do this, I just want to make sure. Okay. All right. So the purpose of this is to read the request method and the request URI from the server globals on our own server as Portscope, and then find the first matching route, run it with its handlers. And after that, it will call for 40405 just in case there is any fallback to them. So each function, which is public. So this is a public function that we're calling dispatch. Dispatch. The value type is void. Void moves with null. So that's why we call dispatch here in index.php. This. So it's the function you're trying to call here. And yes, what happened to our code? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's it. That's actually it. When we required once router.php, router.php calls the dispatch function out of the router.php to be able to do all these requests, and then index.php gets to understand them. That's how object oriented programming language works. It's an object, it's an object within a function. Function is the class called router, and that function shows that we are able to do. I don't know whether you understand these things, but let's continue. So we shall say method the server. Yeah, should be the server where you're able to get principal, but the difference is we're just trying to make this more professional by getting everything, and we manage its case. So and then this is request method. Any of the request, is it get, post, put, patch, or any other? So request method get is the, yeah. And the next thing would yes, request this is request URI. And this is just for organization. Do that. So okay. So we go to string friend our UI. Does this g if we had slash about and then we say this one. If we had this goes to this should change to slash about. So to do this, you say URI equals to equals to I can just say request URI and that can unknown. Then the next thing would be so we get to percent including characters. Then normalize slashes now. We shall say that what is this? URL decode. There was a string necessary. Was a string necessary? Was a string necessary? Was that wrong? And it's not encode, it's not decode. You are encode. So it's your encode this as a string. No, 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 no. This is wrong. This should be that. So that so that if we have URL encode, we have something like that. URL should replace key and then your alien code string value. This is here. This opens and okay, this opens and closes even yellow. That's fine. At this level, okay. So back to dispatch. We had a method, then request URI, then URI is that. Then we need to decode social. So URI equals to row decode more URI row URL decode of our URI. So that this times our URI to no need string replace, so just need slash concatenate is our URL. That's okay, but we need to trim it. So we trim the URI from the slash. Okay. And after this, we lock the register routes. So from here, we move the register routes. Save it. We're going to create a new method and we're going to call it matched. We shall say matched methods. Give us so that it's ready to collect methods for routes whose URI are being matched. Then we start a loop by saying for each named route as route this is just yes, yeah. So as I say as just route. Is that mine? If it's not a preg batch, then over if it's not a preg batch, this is wrong. Just remember we had created something called we had created something called we had created something called pattern. No, it's called pattern. So if we routes pattern is that pattern different matches would have created. Then URI pattern did not get to skip. So whatever happens here is this is to ensure that if the URI no URI if the URI pattern doesn't match, then skip use that. But if it already worked, but if it really matched the record allowed, if URI matched, then record the allowed method in the system by saying match record route match. This is not so correct. It's this match methods. We had route, and then inside here is going to say then after that we get to check HTTP method compatibility. We had mentioned of that earlier by saying that yes. So if if route if route method is not this is a strict one. Let us use that to what we have defined as any above and this so-called route this so-called route this so-called route with its method is not just a method. Just it's not a methods. Okay. Then continue. This is more of a flowchart. See it in the flowcharts that we spoke of last time. It goes through different filters that if the URL pattern didn't match, skip. If it fell under any, but there's no method, then skip. But if it fully matched, shall say perhaps gives us to um, array filter. We want to remove array filter. Yes. H USBH. Asa. Gwenda nzajina n'enjimuwa. Mbadde nina flash n'enjimuwa. Mpozi nga maze n'agikuwa. Ekyaji sikiwanda agikuwa. Simanyi. Mbadde ekyaginga simu. So we shall say this. This we shall say celebrations. FN key give us no. So key must be not null but rather is not. This is the opposite of integer. And the given key. Then array filter use key. And we get to terminate. Undefined customer. Okay, let's see where we write this. Params gives us a filter, and then we say matches. If n is the key, then the array filter use key, and then we terminate it right here. Then we shall say params equals array here we should say with this so-called params, then we finally get to right. This must give us this is handler. Okay. So this is what this is handle now. And the other side is params. This need to return. So return. Another possibility is if another possibility is if we know what this much, we shall say that if empty matched methods so we shall say this handle not allowed. Matched methods not allowed. Use matched methods. Very last else. In case everything fails, then the URI itself need image anything and return this to a page. Say link is handle not found. So when you've got the handle execution, Jesus. Handle not found. Handle execution. Let's go. No error except somewhere here where first this versus okay, it's here. N key fix this. Okay. Mm, okay. Fix the attached problem. Syntax error, unexpected token. Okay. So let's get something up online. You've got a couple of syntax issues in this snippet. You've fixes made array filter. It's hypercorrecting. And then arrow syntax fn key is invalid fn then dash key. Alright. So this is supposed to be array filter and then this is supposed to be a key and this is also supposed to be a key. Okay, let's just copy paste it right there. Copy and then come here and then paste so that this can move to there. So params array key matches. If any key isn't fn key, array filter use. Now what's this error? So some of these errors we shall have to go them and take them to a good debug case so that we've got a syntax error in that line. The array index is missing a closing bracket. Ready? Ready? What are we going to eat? No, please. Then explain. So that the rest is okay. Close. So 174 lines of code is started here. So for each that, then do closing ones. Then we come back to our function. It's started here, public function. So it forms and closes position. Which is the desk on is not taken last day. Yakoze bingi already uploading ebifana see that. Let me first finish. But that's okay. Upload. Or take a yo.
It's too early.
No, take a cutting on what your time will do. Mm. Is that read the receipt? Mwana uze ebibuuzo. Because they can't. So, no route is matched. Okay. Not yet done. We need a handle execution. So, this batch started here, then it ended for each. This. It was blue closing. Then for each, okay. So right outside of this, we shall say we have a private function. And this function is called run handler that takes on our handler. An array of params and void perfect, and in this we shall start another flow to see that we can run the execution. It can be either a string, which is treated as a view name node, it can be callable. So we shall say that if this is callable as a handler, then don't call user file where we have the handler and params return another condition string, because if it's a string and it's a handler, then if it's a string and a handler need to load a view file, then we need to sanitize to allow all safe characters to prevent path travel like we did in the earlier PHP. So we should say so we should say view name equals to yes. It needs to be sanitized by saying print replace but this which put it under this. So shall say have reference yes every regex will print that with that orichiza kunyamba kompyuta papi agenda mukulu. That A to Z, Z 0 to 9 underscore slash dash inbox and probably that one yes those and then another one would and then this with all spaces. So this is the name. Yes, I know that if it's a view file, it's not if it's a view file. So as a ukakasa why it's a view file and then this will give us the views path, get it from the view name. And then this is dot PHP like that. So that if it exists this view file, then params available inside the view as params and also extract HP as its own variable. So we shall first extract those params, G, the ID, then we shall include them to the view file. What else? Let's see if everything there failed. Then we can just say this. Then handle not found. We already had handle not found. That method is already defined, so we call it here. Okay. Then otherwise, return. After return, we need to handle unknown handler type log and we shall say that in our error log, let there be this text. You can say something like return unrecognized handler type for route. It will work. When we say this should be not found. Back to errors. We have 5 errors here. This it's about 202 lines of code and a router. These objects. That's method. Vote being that this being this. Error log return. Yeah, let's run error log. Let's and then this and then this. Not found. Yeah. What's this? Handle not found. Handle not found. Excuse me. This is better. You can just say this and path news. Take it. Two warnings. Excuse me. Handle not found. Handle not found. Mm, excuse me. Let's try it. Master. To define the current scope. So this PHP exists. I'm saying it's around scope. Two, 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 two. Let's try this. How about that? Excuse me. Mm, no, I don't know from this phone. I'm expecting to be event. Mm, okay. So, just want to print array outs, not allowed, empty, use path, itself. See, steering, that was okay, fallback and plus, and then this, public keys function. Okay, let's find where this problem is. Let's find where exactly this is. Who's the public function is Hmm? Sorry. And listed, yeah. Of course, that's what I did at first. I'm sorry. So, do you have some water? So, this is all under that. Then outside. Is that, and we get this private. Oh, okay. Take it. I was hoping for employment. So people, I don't actually know. That's what I So private. Then the next thing we have to do, error responses. Responses. Error handling in PHP. So what do we do in case? What do we do in case something happens? So this is where handle not phone comes to life. So let's say handle not phone, and then in handle not allowed, handle not found. So one that is trigger. So handle not found. When handle not found, then HTTP response codes. HTTP response. Yes, sir. But